Thanks so much. I'm probably going to have violated all 7 rules that were just described in the last talk, so apologies. I am going to talk to you about viruses. So this is a stock portfolio from a Chinese pharmaceutical company called Guangzhou Baiyunshan Pharmaceuticals. And the reason I have this up here isn't to tell you that we should be investing in the emerging Chinese market, but as an epidemiologist, I'm really concerned about this stock portfolio because they are the leading suppliers of a Chinese herbal medication that actually has antiviral properties. And as you can see, the stock was rising in 2003, early 2003, and that was actually linked to increased sales of this product and an emerging virus that was taking place in Guangdong province in China. And 2 months later, we then get the WHO official warning about SARS. Now, if we had been looking at this information, looking at the data that was available at the time, we could have actually done something to control SARS at its source and potentially prevent a global pandemic. So SARS is just one example of many emerging diseases, tens or thousands of viruses that are emerging yearly. And there's the ones you know, H1N1, West Nile virus, but there are many ones that you don't know. Lassa, dengue, maybe someone you know has had dengue, Marburg. Many of these things are emerging in populations around the world at incredible speeds. Now, the problem with traditional public health is that it's incredibly slow. So someone gets sick, they then get seen by by a physician or healthcare worker. Then that information travels to local officials. That information then is confirmed by laboratories. That information then flows to ministries of health at the country level. And then finally, that ends up on the desk of the WHO. So that's an incredibly slow process. That means that the ability for us to contain a pandemic or virus at its source is very difficult. But now with emerging technologies, web-based tools, that information, that intelligence that we can find on the web means that there's bidirectional communication. Everyone who has an interest in what's happening in the population can have access to that information at the exact same time. So we've done a lot of work to understand the impact and the ability for us to find new emerging viruses in populations. And we've done an historical look at this information, whereas in the mid-90s it took over 3 months to find a new virus as it was emerging in a population. Now it takes under 3 weeks. But 3 weeks is still not good enough because a virus emerges within 24 hours. It can be around the globe and at everyone's doorstep. So what we're really thinking about is where we can tap into information sources to truly find that next virus. So this is a stylized epidemic curve showing the increase in cases and then finally that decrease. During that time, people might be sending SMS messages, tweeting about their illness on a social network, talking about disease, talking about their family members, blogging. All that data is out there. And if we could collect that information and harness it in an appropriate way, we can begin to actually understand and see these things emerging in populations. And that's why we developed 3 years ago a site called HealthMap, healthmap.org, which through funding from Google is essentially designed to organize the world's global public health information and really identify that first emerging information piece about a disease happening in a population. So the system, I'll just give you a brief overview, collects over 50,000 websites every hour, fully automated in 7 different languages, looking for specific cues, specific words like epidemic in a particular article. Then we collect about 600 new events per day, extracting disease and location from an information source. We then try to categorize that information, essentially like a spam filter where we're organizing articles, new information pieces about events that are taking place. We are particularly interested in information sources that are breaking or warning or telling us about something taking place. And we essentially, on the website, we have a Netflix-style rating process where people can decide whether something is important, not important, and essentially allow those pieces of information to float to the top. We then use that information and disseminate it globally. So to our partners at the WHO and CDC, we can then get that information out the door. And so HealthMap has particular value, obviously, to CDC and WHO, but also to world travelers, where we see over 1 million users per year coming to this website looking for information where it's not available elsewhere on the web. So here's a good example. April 1st, there's cases of unusual respiratory illness in Veracruz, Mexico. Then 2 cases of influenza-like illness in Southern California. Within a matter of days, a virus is spread globally, and this keeps going and going. This was the first signs of H1N1 in the population. Now, our cues about H1N1 did not come from the CDC or WHO. It came from a local newspaper in the particular town where the virus was emerging from actually a news report. And this was a Spanish media news report, which was the first signs well before anybody was talking about the virus. But we can do better. We can actually try to figure out how to get information directly from the population, not just think about using the news media, but think about how we collect information from the individual. Crowdsourcing, which is definitely a term that's emerging, is not only just for news, but also for public health events. We're considering this idea of participatory epidemiology, where individuals are collecting information, whether it's about themselves or family members, and submitting that and organizing that data, and we can harness that information with special tools and get that back into the population. So this is one example. We launched an iPhone application called Outbreaks Near Me, and essentially enables the individual to know about events happening around them. So very simply, it uses the GPS location of your phone to tell you about all the outbreaks that are happening. If there's an Ebola outbreak, your phone will buzz and tell you you might want to take cover. But it also allows you to report in disease events. So we can actually get information directly from users about the diseases they're experiencing or their family members are experiencing. And surprisingly, people actually care about public health, and we were surprised with over 100,000 downloads in the first month. So in fact, people were interested in using this kind of a tool. And during H1N1, people were rampantly describing their H1N1 illness in a way that we were actually able to collect a substantial amount of data. So people were submitting in through their iPhone illness that they were experiencing. We are also getting people trying to game the system. This is people saying they had H1N1, but probably most likely not. But they've got other issues. But if we aggregate that information all into one source, we can actually begin to track the epidemic in a way that's actually 2 weeks ahead of the Centers for Disease Control information. And with a very low-cost app, only costs a few $1,000s to create, and it's free and it exists year after year, we can actually do a job that's as good, or if not better, than the CDC. Obviously, this type of technology is really in the hands of in the developing world, but we're really interested in exploring the increase in use of smartphones in the developing world. We actually implemented a tool using the iPad and iPhone in Haiti, where physicians were able to report in cases of malaria, of dengue, things they were seeing in the population. When there was no public health infrastructure after the earthquake, we had a tool that was actually telling us what was happening in the population in real time. And so what we really see is the next generation of public health. It's not necessarily the public health official, the Department of Public Health in New York City, although they're important as well, but it's the power of the individual, whether it's through their phone, through the web. That information collectively can tell us something very powerful about emerging public health threats. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully I stayed within my 7 minutes, and look forward to chatting later. Thanks.